Hello, everyone. Welcome to another BDPA Tech and Career Talk. I am our National Tech and Career Talk leader, Devin Jenkins. I serve as a commercial IT success manager at GE Healthcare. And also the founder CEO of Share the Vibes LLC. So excited to have you with us. We always like to do a little quick intro of BDPA as well as the Tech and Career Talks just to make sure everyone is familiar with the organization and this platform. If you are new to us, BDPA is Black Data Processing Associates. The organization started in 1975 as a way to continue to build the African American talent pipeline in the technology field. So we have a lot of focus around youth, developing computer skills, professional development, technology skills in general with middle and high school students. And then we also have activities and forums for collegiate students and professionals to continue building up their professional skill sets, some technical skill sets to stay relevant in the industry. And our mantra is advancing careers from the classroom to the boardroom. I'm so glad to have you with us. These are our tech and career talks. These take place on the second and fourth Friday of each month. We have a range of speakers. Like today, we have a technical expert talking about AI. Sometimes we've had people talking about working with jerks in the past, and everything in between. So we give you soft skills, hard skills, something that everyone can take value from, regardless of where you're at in your career, whether you're a student or you're a retired executive. It doesn't matter. We have something for everyone. So I'm glad to have you with us. Excited for today's conversation. Dr. Johnson, now some things have changed since she was on the platform last. I think that was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But we're excited to have you with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing amazing. I've made it to Friday, so I can't complain.
There it is. That is a reason to be happy. Well,
Mhm.
we'll jump into it. So Dr. Nadiyah Johnson is with us. No, we've been friends for a while. We both used to work together at GE Healthcare, and she's gone on to do some amazing things. So we'll get into that a little bit. But first, just to break the ice a little bit, let's just start with when did you fall in love with tech?
I fell in love with technology when I realized that I can combine what I was most interested in and technology to help people. To be transparent, it definitely wasn't like the start of my journey in computer science. The first part was, quite difficult and challenging because, I was getting acclimated to, what it will require from me academically. But it wasn't really until I got into my final year in college where I had to do a capstone project, which is pretty common. And I was building this non-invasive diabetes monitoring system with a group. And I really saw how, combining computer science and my love of healthcare could really translate into impacting people in a way that some of my other friends who were in different fields couldn't, right? They were more like, research based, and it would take, years, sometimes decades to see their research come to life. In computer science, literally whatever it is that you can dream of, you can really like hold it out these days and bring it to life. And so that's really when I started to fall in love with computer science.
That's quite the story. A non-invasive diabetic monitoring system. Okay, we might have to talk a little bit
Yes.
more about that offline. I'm just intrigued. But, no, that's cool, man. That's definitely impactful for communities and using
Hmm.
technology in a way that we don't always think about.
Hmm.
Especially being in a med tech company, I see I have a different perspective of that, myself. So it's cool. And also just
Hmm.
make some things make sense. Thanks for
Hmm.
sharing that. So, just kind of maybe going down that path a little bit more. I used to do intros and I read people's bios when we do these, but I like to let people tell their own stories now. I just think it's
Sure.
better that way. So, tell us a little bit about who you are and the many things that you do.
Yeah. Okay. Happy to. I wear many hats, but I am most well known for being a technologist. I have been in the field of technology for over 10 years now. But I'm also an artist, and I like to share that because I think that it's really important for folks to embrace their multidimensional selves. And so, actually, if you take a look behind me, this is one of my pieces. And so I share that because my creativity side has really helped in terms of accelerating my career in technology. But I started my corporate sort of job in 2016 at GE Healthcare, as you alluded to. And it took me 4 years to realize that I probably don't belong in corporate. um, and I remember, Devin, a long time ago, I think you said something like, "Yeah, you're not going to be here for too long," and it was because I truly feel like I have this entrepreneurial spirit that that had sort of led me to start my own company in 2017, late 2017, and eventually take that on in a more full time capacity in 2020. So I started my company, Jet Constellations, a for profit that builds custom software, but we have a social impact arm that is by far the most community facing portion of the company called Milky Tech Hub. And so we work to increase representation in the field of technology through three pillars: STEM educational workforce, entrepreneurship, and community. And community is, I like to say, is one of my favorite. It is my favorite pillar because without community, Milky Way Tech just would not be where we are. We started with community meetups and eventually evolved into programming that now reaches thousands of students across our public school system, charter schools. We even, have homeschooling communities, and we even go into correctional facilities these days. We provide grants to startups, and now we're home to the largest tech convening in the Midwest, Wisconsin Tech Month. And so a lot has happened over the last almost 7 years, if you can believe it, Devin,
Mhm.
that I have started my entrepreneurship journey, and I'm just tremendously pleased with the amount of traction that we've been able to make. On top of that, am also a professor at Marquette University. So I teach in the computer science department. And I'm pleased to share, as Devin mentioned earlier, that I just recently graduated with my PhD. And so I'm now working on building curriculum for Marquette University in the artificial intelligence space. So, yeah, I'll stop there. On a personal note, I am an auntie of two amazing Black boys. And, I find that to be the most important role that I have right
Man, many hats, many hats. So thank you for sharing all of that. Quite the story there. And I know we have a good crowd on here today, and many more people watching on YouTube. So yeah, make sure you like, share, subscribe, comment, click the bell below, so you know when we post. All my gotta get my influential speech. So back on task here. So you touched on it a little bit. Today is about AI for all, empowering communities through technology and innovation. Can you go just a little bit deeper into how you've been able to empower communities through your businesses and these initiatives like Wisconsin Tech Month, which is becoming like Midwestern Tech Month?
now.
How have you been able to empower communities through the work you do?
You know what? I think the first thing is showing up as my authentic self. I said yesterday in a keynote, um, and I got this quote from Arlen Hamilton, a really great venture capitalist. You have to show up as your authentic self so that the people who are looking for you can find you. And so I think the first step was just showing up as my authentic self and really projecting what I cared about, which is community. I wanted to make sure that as the technology opportunities that were being presented to me, um, I was also showcasing these possibilities and the grand potential that the tech industry has to offer to my community as well. And so the best way to do that is to do so in a more structured format, having a business. And so creating different programs under Milky Way Tech Hub has helped us to reach more people in a really big way. And so we have a Tech Hub model where we have corporate members. So I'll name a few like American Family, Northwestern Mutual, Milwaukee Tool. We work with these different corporations that reside or are headquartered here, and we ask the question, how do you want to make a mark or place your footprint in our tech ecosystem? And then we find programs that we can deliver to the community. Now, one thing that I think is interesting that I want folks to take away from this is that we are not a nonprofit. And I think that I just want people to know that because I think people assume that Milky Way Tech Hub is a nonprofit because of all of the good that we do. But it is very, very possible to have a social impact enterprise. And that's very much what Milky Way Tech Hub is. And the model that we're creating is one that we're looking to be replicable across different cities in the country. And so right now we're working, as you mentioned, with our initiative Wisconsin Tech Month to take the model that we're creating with Milky Way Tech Hub and start to scale to make it more of a regional effort. So this year is the first year in Wisconsin Tech Month where we are dedicating a week, which happens to be this week, to Midwest Tech Week, where we're working with neighboring tech hubs in Chicago and Detroit and so on. And so this is our pilot year, but I think that there's importance in finding ways to scale in this capacity. For those who don't know, Wisconsin Tech Month is a statewide month-long initiative where we crowdsource events, and right now we're 100 plus events across the entire state, and now starting to work to that regional effort as well.
That's amazing. Uh, just knowing you and where you come, but also just the passion you're putting behind making things like what we're talking about today accessible for our communities who the information hasn't always been accessible to, at least not easily
Right.
accessible to.
Yeah.
So thank you for all
And,
you're doing, and I
and
think
if I
it's
could add,
important. Yep.
if I could add to that though too, we have traditionally been kind of left out of this computer science or technology era, right? And now with the rise of or the increased usage of artificial intelligence, I'm starting to see similar conversations that have kind of plagued our communities in the past as it relates to the technology space, where unfortunately different communities or pockets of our communities are so afraid to get into the space, or maybe even intimidated, or think that they don't belong. And it's one of the things that really fuels me right now. So the theme for Wisconsin Tech Month is artificial intelligence and the future of work. Because we are gearing a lot of our programming towards AI to bring about that awareness and education, so that we can kind of like demystify certain things that kind of keep us or pose as a barrier to keep Black and Brown communities out of that space.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. So I want to get into AI and get into the meat of the conversation now. So we've established your expert on this. You did a whole dissertation around this, so you've done the research. You know what you're talking about. So maybe a simple question to answer may or may not be as simple. We'll see. But plainly, what is AI and what isn't AI?
So, okay, I like this question. I get asked, what is AI all the time, but rarely do I get what it isn't AI. So I appreciate that question. So AI, to put it simply, is getting a machine to carry out a task that a human can do. And those tasks usually fall under the buckets of learning, reasoning, carrying out some form of logic. Um, and so I think a good example that I could use is maybe something as basic as filtering in your emails, right? So you can set a rule-based system to say, and I think my father does this for me, so I never gets my emails, but like when Nadiyah emails me, send it to this folder, right? So that technically isn't AI per se, because it doesn't require learning or adaptability, okay? However, there are forms of email filtering that do require artificial intelligence. Okay, so maybe if you use Gmail, and you might see that there's different tabs like promotional emails, or spam, or marketing, or social media, right? Okay, so likely there is some form of artificial intelligence there, because there's a system that is using more than just one tag, but learning from the content in that email to say, okay, this is these phrases, or this kind of content, or the amount of text, like different sort of characteristics are being used within that model to determine whether or not this is a promotional email, or this is spam, or this is social media, right? And so that kind of helps you to see the difference between just basic automation, rule based, versus a model that requires learning and understanding a pattern and adapting from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I actually hadn't heard that distinction before. So
Okay.
that makes it make sense because I definitely am familiar with email filtering and setting of rules, kind of like if then statements. But
It's a really basic example, right?
yeah,
But it helps folks to kind of get a sense of the difference.
yeah, that really like clarified it in my head. So yeah, I learned something today. That definitely makes a distinction there. So, um, kind of taking it a step further, because this is a tech organization, we got techies on the line. So, kind of how does AI work? Like, what's the ingredients? What's the recipe that just makes this magic happen? Like, what's the loop that
Yeah.
makes it
Okay.
run?
So let's get into it. So it does feel like magic, right? Okay. If you're working with Charlie or ChatGPT, I call him Charlie because he, yeah. But if you're working with like ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, it feels like you're talking to a genie almost, right? It feels like a little bit of magic, but it's not magic. It's another M word, and it's called math. Okay. So it begins with math, algorithms. Okay. So, an algorithm is just a sequence of steps that get you to a target outcome, right? So, long division technically is an algorithm. Me doing the Rubik's Cube is an algorithm. And so, there are different algorithms that have specific functions, whether it be, classifying, predicting, describing something that's happening, right? Once an algorithm is at the point where it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's a model, so it's math that has a set function, um, and that's what we call models. So there's different types of models. There's you know linear regression and logistic regression, and more advanced is like these deep learning models. Natural language processing happens to be my field of expertise, but it begins with uh, collecting data. Okay, so these models are trained on a ton of data. Okay, and then with that data, these models then are able to establish patterns. Okay, and those patterns again could be classification, it could be predicting, prescriptive, and then once those patterns have been established, there's some sort of output. Okay, and that could be a response to your prompt. It could be predicting the weather. It could be whatever those models are made to do. Okay. So it begins with data. That data then uses math, algorithms, the model to come up and drive insights, patterns, and then we get the output. Okay. So now when it comes to natural language processing, right? This is the new subset of artificial intelligence called Gen AI that works to develop content, whether it's um, images or these days video, which is super scary.
Hmm.
And of course, with natural language processing specifically, text. And so what it does is it takes this data. It's been trained on abundance of data. Like think of like all of the internet, right? Um, and it is really really good at predicting the next probable word. Okay, so much so that when we are having conversations with it, um, it feels as though we're talking to like a human, but really you're having a conversation with math. It's predicting. The model is so strong that it can predict the statistically probable next word. And just like us humans, right? So I did a fun exercise with my students recently to help them to really wrap their head around Gen AI. I said I'm going to start with a random sentence, which is over a midterm break, I found a blue bunny. That's a very random sentence, right? And then I said, now, I pointed to a student, I said, now I want you to tell me the next sentence of this story. So he gave me a random sentence, and then the next student did. And so we ended up building out this, cool story. It was actually frightening. But it was end up with this long story. And I said, you know how you were able to do that? Very similar to how Gen AI works. You have lived experience, like the data that AI has. And so you were able to take the first sentence that I had and then create contextually relevant next words and sentences. And that's exactly how Gen AI kind of works conceptually. So I did my best to explain artificial intelligence in like 3 minutes, but hopefully, hopefully that helps.
No,
Yeah.
It makes sense. And, it's funny. I was Kev on stage is one of my favorite comedians these days, and somebody sent me a reel last night, and he was asking ChatGPT to respond like a black person in church or something. So it was like, like God
That's
is good, and
funny.
ChatGPT was like all the time, all the time.
Oh my goodness.
It was like a 2 minute exchange. It's
That
so
is so
funny, but
hilarious
it's
and
it's
slightly
funny just
problematic.
to think that we've gotten to a point with technology where we're training computers to apply contextual relevance to tell stories, more or less in some way, form, or fashion. That story might be a math problem, it might be a song, but it's essentially a new way of storytelling. If I break it down the way my mind works.
Yeah, and I like that. It is a new way to communicate and express our ideas, and to extrapolate on our ideas, which I think will allow for a new avenue of creativity. And so that's where I think we can be optimistic about. But I think that it's great that you brought up that meme or that video, Kevin on stage. I love Kevin, by the way. One of the funny prompts. It wasn't necessarily a written prompt, but I personally love using the voice feature for ChatGPT. It is a life hack. If you've only been using the text, I encourage you to use the voice feature. But I was using the voice feature, and I said, Charlie, I wonder if you understand. What is the word where it's kind of like black dialect? I'm forgetting though.
Ebonics.
Ebonics, yeah. And he was just like, yeah, I do. I said, well, talk to me. Talk to me like you understand African American vernacular. And he did. And it was problematic. And it made me wonder, like, okay, how are you trained on this? And then I think, it sort of started bringing up these questions around like, um, who's trading these models and on what data and at what cost. And then it also starts to bring up these more serious questions around, what does it mean for these large language models to be trained um, on these dominant languages like English, right? And the reality is that language is not neutral. Language holds history. Language holds biases. It holds power dynamics, right? And these are sort of questions I think we need to start asking of the industry, because they will, as in natural language processing models and just large language models in general, begin to be used and commercialized in products that we use every single day. They're likely going to carry some of that biases and power dynamics and so on. So I took a funny thing to a serious note, but but these are
Yeah, I
important
mean, it's
topics.
real. It's not a one-sided story. There's different vantage points to all of this,
Mm.
and I think that's a good segue into something you mentioned earlier, which is the future of work. And I wanted to ask you, what does the future of work look like as AI continues to grow and evolve? And for this group specifically, are there certain skills, tools, languages, et cetera, that we need to be learning right now to make sure we're relevant as AI continues to evolve over the next 5, 10, 20 years?
Yeah, great question. And I think there's like two parts. The first part is I'll say that, and I just got done saying this yesterday. I think it was yesterday. Everything's blending together. But I was on this panel and I said that it's okay for us to say that, we may not know. And the reason why I'm starting off there is because um, the the subject matter experts in this space are shocked and surprised by how fast things are moving. I mean, we predicted that we would get to where we are, but I don't know that many of us thought that we would get here so quickly. For instance, when ChatGPT first came out, I have been working on natural language processing for the last 5-6 years on my research. When ChatGPT came out in 2022, there were industry conversations about how, man, one day it's gonna wipe away software engineers, but we got at least 10 years. Now, definitively, we could say that like Copilot and different AI models are coding better than first, second, third year software engineers. and it's only been 24 months, right? So I think it's okay for us to say that we don't have a full understanding of where we're going to be in 5 years because of how fast this thing is moving. That being said, let me tell you like what my thoughts are. Okay, so I feel that we are going to start seeing more AI centered roles. Product ownership roles that are AI specific. I think we're going to start seeing roles that require more strategy and critical thinking and understanding how to work with AI. You know what that's going to require for you to know how AI works. So I'm sure at this point everybody has heard the saying, "It's not AI that's going to take your job; it's the person that knows how to use AI." Right, right. It is going to be very critical for people to understand how it works, so that you can understand how to work with it. I think that it's no secret because it's already happening within large businesses and small businesses to an extent. AI, is starting to take jobs, but also there's going to be this opportunity where new jobs are going to be created. So what I always tell folks is, whatever questions that you have, right, lean into those questions because those questions are pointing to the future. Those questions are going to highlight what jobs are going to exist. For instance, maybe some of the conversation that we had not too long ago, a couple minutes ago, about like who's training these models, or who's going to be maintaining these models, or how are we making sure or validating that these models are accurate. Um, who's creating the data sets, cleaning and mining the data sets to feed into these models. Whatever questions you have, those are likely going to be some of the jobs that we're going to be seeing created very soon as well. So I would lean into your questions, which means that you have to start to explore and learn about this space in order for you to have questions, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. Now, in terms of like upskilling and educating yourself, it's kind of like I tell my students like driving, right? Like I can talk to you about it just like I am right now, but you got to get behind the steering wheel, okay? Because it's just like with driving, you're not going to know how to drive until you start to drive. So don't be afraid. Get in there, right? Even just starting with prompting, understanding how to communicate with AI is a skill set, right? And there are so many folks who I think already like talk themselves out of it, thinking like, you got to be a genius to understand AI. No, like the just scratching the surface, just go on ChatGPT or use Copilot, Claude, Gemini. I'm naming some of the different open source or free um, AI models that you can use just to understand how to best communicate with it, right? How to best prompt. And then if you're interested in becoming a bit more technical, I mean, there's so many different micro certifications that you can take. I believe I just learned that Microsoft has different certifications in partnership with LinkedIn Learning, where you can understand data science or have a better understanding of how artificial intelligence is going to impact your specific industry. And then I think, I've been saying this since I started Milky Way Tech Hub. You have to follow your curiosity, right? And again, it goes back to what I said earlier about showing up as your authentic self. Become the subject matter expert of the thing that you love and figure out how to combine that with artificial intelligence. And that, I think, is how you're going to make yourself future proof, is becoming that subject matter expert. So I mean, I could talk about this one thing forever, but hopefully that helps or answers that question.
Absolutely, and I see some thoughts starting to stir in the chat, so we're definitely going to circle back to those here pretty soon. So just to make this a little more practical for us on the call, so maybe we don't want to be the AI experts, but we do want to use this to benefit our lives. So how can we leverage AI today, both personally and professionally, to make our lives a little bit easier?
Yeah. So I love that question. Because not everybody wants to learn how to code or, be the nerd, right? Um, but I think that there's things that you can do even right now, like like while I'm even, while you're on this Zoom, pull up ChatGPT and start prompting. But I think for me, I'll answer it two parts, personal and professional. And I'll start with personal. So I mentioned that I love using ChatGPT, the voice feature. It's honestly it's incredible. I'm mind blown every single time. But I think I use it almost like a personal assistant. So you know how like imagine like Beyonce or Oprah or whatever. These are these big celebrities or CEOs like Satya Nadella. They have personal assistants because they've got so many thoughts in their head, and they need someone to talk to and say, hey, write this down or remind me of this later, or build out my agenda for next week because I've got this and this going on. So for me, I'll turn on the voice feature, and I'll say this first. I say, hey, don't interrupt me. All right, I have to say that because the model is trained to be responsive, right? So he'll say okay, or I shouldn't say he, but it'll say, okay, I won't interrupt you and go ahead. So then I started to talk about my day and say, like, okay, well, it's Wisconsin Tech Month, it's the fourth week. I got a lot going on. I got to make sure that I show up for Dev for the BDPA meeting. I got to make sure that I go to this keynote. And the topic that they want me to touch on is, impact and creating impact in computer science and in the world of AI. I have to make sure that I call my nephew and tell him about my day. There's a couple of things that I gotta make sure. I go to the grocery store. I gotta make sure I get my collagen, make sure I get my kale. Da, da, da. I'm just listing off random stuff, right? And then I said, can you build me out a weekly agenda and prioritize all of those different things based off of what you know about me? And set up an agenda for me day by day and to do list, top three tasks. And I go on. And just like that, boom, 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 everything that I need. That's one way, just like one way that I like to use AI, and it's a life hack, guys. Okay, um, I can go on about. Maybe I'll give you one more example of how I use AI on a personal note. I'm learning Spanish. I have to learn Spanish because I serve a Latina community with Latinos in tech, and so while I do pay a tutor, and I think that it is important to continue to use humans for that sort of educational format, I still love using ChatGPT. So I'll say, "You are my tutor today." And understand that I am very, new at learning Spanish. So I need you to speak to me slowly, but I'm going to start talking to you in Spanish, and I need you to speak back. And then afterwards, I need you to evaluate how well I did today and what I need to work on. And when I tell you, it has accelerated my learning like no other. So I'm giving you these examples because they're personal ways that I use ChatGPT, but kind of give you a range of like, okay, from building out my day all the way to just like helping me to learn things that I just happen to be interested in, have not necessarily like something that I directly have to do for work, but I'm very much interested and would help me in my day to day and my professional life as well. So then more so on the professional end, I think people want to know how to make money with it, right? And including myself, I'm exploring ways all the time. I think the most optimistic view of the world that we're in with the advancing technologies and artificial intelligence is that AI can really be that tool to help us to decrease the wealth gap. Or if we don't leverage it the way that we're supposed to right now, it's going to widen the wealth gap in such a way that we'll never be able to close it. And so I think we have a decision to make as a people on how we want to leverage this technology. I don't like. I've been saying this, and I'm starting to check myself. I've been saying there's no excuse now, right? There's no excuse because AI is right at your fingertips. I'm starting to backtrack and saying there's no excuse per se because you have to look at a person holistically, right? And so maybe people don't have broadband access, or maybe people don't have certain resources, or even know to even get on a Zoom like this to learn about it, right? But when I say like there's no excuse, that what I'm trying to convey is that there are so many open source tools now where we can bring in passive income if you allow yourself to explore and learn. So let's talk about it. I wrote some things down. An example might be just an ebook. So most folks at this point know about Canva, right? So using ChatGPT, for instance, to say, hey, build out a child story for a young Black boy who's interested in space. I want the story to include a part where he's challenged, a part where he's learning about Jupiter, maybe, and he's exploring different planets, and he becomes, I don't know, the top kid astronaut in the world. And so ChatGPT will build out this story for you, and then you can critique and continue to prompt it to refine that story. So now once you've got maybe 20 pages for this child story, right? This nighttime, story that you would read to a kid. Then you would ask ChatGPT will build out for each page an image. Okay. So now you've got images for that story. All right. I'm simplifying it a bit, but just to give you a sense. So then you can use a platform like Canva. And Canva has templates now where you can they have templates because they see people are using it for this very thing. You can just upload your story from ChatGPT, your pictures. Now you have an ebook. Then you combine it with the last platform, Amazon Kindle or Amazon eBooks. You upload that thing, set a price, and now you can start making money in your sleep. So this is what I kind of mean by there's no excuses, because the way that you spend 8 hours, working or learning about different things, you could do that for yourself. You could spend a weekend to learn these new skills and to put something on the internet and make passive income, learn about it. And if nothing else, even if you're not making money from the ebook, you can make money by creating a webinar to talk about how you made the ebook, right? So here's just one little example. Another one is make.com, which is I won't say the first of its kind, but it's really starting to make waves in the automation space. So go to make.com and you'll see that this is a way to automate different tasks. So for instance, I'm taking a look at something that I wrote down, like an idea. So say you're in real estate, or say you want to be in real estate, but you never took the license, but you want to be in that space. You want to be a subject matter expert. All right. You can use make.com, ChatGPT, a Zillow API to scrape all of Zillow, which is like this real estate platform that has in different listings, and then use AI to say, what are the top 10 listings? Create a newsletter of these top 10 listings. Make it that AI would automate this, by the way. And every Friday, send out a newsletter with the top listings in Milwaukee or in this zip code or something like that. Or maybe it's for people who are looking for houses, or maybe it's a service that you can provide as a lead generator to a real estate firm. And just like that, now you've created a business or you've created a following. And whenever you're creating a following, you're creating an avenue for revenue, right? Because then you can say, I got 10,000 folks or 5,000, 2,000, however many, right? Would you like to advertise? And just like that, now you're creating a revenue stream. So I've given, two very different examples, but, instead of real estate, insert sports for girls or for women, right? A newsletter or insert, I don't know, whatever it is that you're interested in instead of real estate, right? But it kind of gives you a sense of how you can combine what it is that you love, become the subject matter expert, use these different platforms and artificial intelligence, big.com, Canva, whatever it is, to automate something, or you can start to just make money in your sleep and you're just watching it work for you. So now I will say I'm making it sound very simple, right? But once you learn it, you realize that it's not more difficult than what you probably do on the day to day in terms of maybe folks who have fantasy football. I don't know what fantasy football is, so that might not be the best analogy. But people who watch stats on things, or are subject matter experts, but not necessarily monetizing it.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. A lot in that. So I got maybe one more question. I'm going to open up the floor because I imagine people's wheels are turning like mine are. You mentioned earlier that part of what holds us back, a lot of people, especially in our communities, is just not really understanding how this works, almost being afraid of the technology. And I think there's some historical context that supports that also. But wanted to ask you, what are the
Yeah.
biggest misconceptions and myths around AI? And maybe a two-part question to go along with that, because you also mentioned some other things I think about, like biases and things. So, in addition to the biggest misconceptions and myths around AI, what are also some of those concerns and risks that we need to be aware of with AI?
The biggest misconceptions. I think the biggest misconception for us is that you have to be a genius to be in the field of technology, computer scientist, or to work AI. You don't. I feel like I don't have to tell this group maybe because maybe a lot of you are engineers. But what I'm finding within our communities is like, oh, like that's not for me, or you're super smart. Like, no, 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 no. Let me tell you something. I got a 26% on my first calculus exam when I was a freshman in college, right? Like, no, it didn't start off with me like being a wizard in math or anything, right? Like this is a space where everyone belongs, and I'll be even more frank. It's not just a space where everyone belongs in terms of perspectives and such, but we're already here. We're already in this space and they're already making big money off of our data, right? So what we have to ask ourselves is, do we want to continue to be passive about this? Or do we want to be producers and actively play a role in this economy? Because we're already in it. It's kind of like, no, I promise I won't go into politics. When people say like, oh, I'm not into politics or whatever. Like, I promise you, like, like politics is dictating your entire life, right? So, oh, I'm not into technology. I hate when people say like, "Oh, I'm not that tech savvy." I know either you said it, or who's on the call right now, or somebody who said it, who's like, "Oh, I'm not that tech savvy," and they think it's kind of cute. Like to me, how I see that these days, like you basically joke and say, "Oh, I don't know how to read." Like if somebody said that, you would be like, "Why would you say that out loud?" Right? And so right now, to me, like we cannot afford to be like, "Oh, I'm not that tech savvy." Like no, like learn about it, and you belong there and you are there, so it makes sense for you to be play a more productive role in this space. I think the other one, which is more of a fun thing, or slightly more lighthearted, I should say. And you sent me a meme some months ago where a lady was, typing to ChatGPT, and then she put the word "please" in front of it, being polite or whatever, right? And I think like there's this myth that you got to be polite to AI because one day they're going to take over the world. And I think it's hilarious. And sometimes I do like to say, like, please, can you do it instead of just be like, do this task for me? My research is in behavioral AI, specifically like teaching AI to understand social context. And you don't have to be polite. You don't. However, when you are polite, just like when you're communicating with a human, likely you are going to share a bit more information. And when you share more information, you're likely going to share context that will help it to give you the best output. So, do you have to be polite to AI? No, but it's a nice green flag for you as a person that you want to be polite. So yeah, those are maybe two things, one that's a bit more heavy and one that's more lighthearted. And I think you asked another question, but I forgot it.
Yeah, it was on. And what are the risks or concerns that we need to be aware of with AI
Oh
also?
yeah. So many risks. Where to start? I think the disinformation and misinformation that is happening on the internet. Um, we're in a political season, for instance, right now, right? And there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation that's out there that can skew people's um, trains of thoughts and thinking, which can be hazardous. What else? There's with deep fakes these days. That's a huge issue. I attended the DNC back in, I think it was whatever, I can't even remember anymore, this year. And I went to a workshop with Microsoft, and they were talking about how, unfortunately, of all of the deep fakes, which is basically simulating an actual person, it looks like the person, either in an image or a video. The most harmful deep fakes are impacting women, right? Because people are taking a woman's face and putting it into the worst sort of videos. I'll let you use your imagination. And so there needs to be more regulation around that immediately. I think the energy consumption, right? There's a viral, I don't know how true it is, but there is some truth to it that, keep one prompt is equivalent like to keeping a light bulb on for like 12 hours or something like that, right? And so there's a sense of urgency that needs to happen around um, the amount of energy that this sort of technology is leveraging as well. I think cyber. I was on a panel with an incredible woman in cybersecurity space, Tina Chang, who mentioned that our next war is likely going to be a cyber war. because of where we are and how we're advancing with artificial intelligence. And so making sure that as AI continues to advance, there's infrastructure in place within healthcare tech, right? In these different industries that need to protect our data. So many different things. And as it relates to us, I mentioned earlier about how language is not neutral and how we need to be mindful of our stories and who actually has access to our stories. I fear that one day so much of the internet is going to be written by AI, that we won't know, what is actually our stories versus, AI generated stories, right? And to me, I think that that's a problem because I think what's most sacred to us is our stories that we pass down to each other. And I think that it's past time for us to take storytelling more serious and maybe even start building out our own language model or database of sorts, in a way that is protected, so that we are not constantly being monetized. Our work is not constantly being monetized without us making $0. So I'm sure there was a more eloquent way to say that, but these are just all the different ways or things that I think we have to be mindful of, and the list. I mean, I've only scratched the surface.
Well, thank you for that. So a lot shared today. The chat has been active, so I'm going to open up the floor for these last few moments to some questions. Andre, I think you had the first question I saw in the chat, so I'll let you kick us off with a question you had.
First off, I'd like to say thank you, Dr. Johnson and Devin, for hosting this. This was pretty awesome. And actually, she answered my question, so no need to even ask it.
Okay, what was it? I don't even.
It was
Oh, there is it.
about data science. Like, can we say AI is just data science? And you answered that already. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I saw a few comments in the chat around polite questions and things with the prompt. So it's funny that you brought that up. Somebody said AI responds better to polite questions, but can also hallucinate.
That's funny.
Andre had also mentioned that I would also add identifying use cases for AI as well. He's saying he's in supply chain. There's a lot of use cases that could be harnessed to benefit operations and manufacturing, since the hardware is caught up with the software. So an observation he shared in there. There was also, a misconception with AI is that whatever it spits out is always correct, which isn't the case. AI can be wrong. So checking the accuracy of what you get back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a lot of comments there in the chat. I see a question, Randolph. I don't know if you're on. If you want to come off mute to ask your question, I'll give you an opportunity. Let me know if not, and I'll ask it for you.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, that was more of a statement because I do some generative, AI and created a few custom GPTs, and so that was kind of more of a statement. But I would like some thoughts, some feedback on that.
Okay. So
What was the
so
question? I'm
so he
sorry.
said, if you are a polite person showing up as your authentic self, wouldn't being polite with AI help train it on how to better interact with you?
That's interesting. I would say maybe yes or no. Because remember, it's trained to spit out the most contextually relevant next word, right? And
Well,
so, I mean, you can tell it like be polite to me or be extra polite or talk to me nice or whatever like floats your boat, right? But I don't know that if you start a new prompt, like a new thread, it's going to like, for instance, when I said, talk to me with Ebonics, the next thread when I open it up, it's not going to talk to me in Ebonics unless like I set some sort of like background setting where I wanted to, right? So I when it comes to like politeness, I don't think that it would talk to you any less polite than than it would unless you prompted it to otherwise. But in the future, I can definitely see those undertones playing a larger role in how it communicates with us. Personally, though, I think that the regulations that are going to continue to be put in place is like not allowing for it to talk to us in a specific manner for this reason, right? Like an article just came out maybe 2 days ago where unfortunately a young person, 14 years old, could not distinguish mentally that they were talking to a chat GPT bot, and they unalived themselves because they had formed an emotional connection. There needs to be regulation around how these bots communicate with humans so that there isn't so much of like you can't gear it to talk to you in certain ways, right? So I do think that the undertones and the emotional aspects will play a role in the future, but I don't know that right now it matters whether or not you're polite.
Yeah, my apologies too. So I phrased that a little incorrectly. So the context I'm coming from is I do a lot of training with micro entrepreneurs
Okay.
and as an entrepreneur, and they do a lot of service businesses, right? And so they're
Mm-hmm.
using AI to create PowerPoint decks, webinar presentations, videos that look like them, and they want the AI to have their voice. And that's what I was speaking from that context. My apologies. Not just to have a general conversation with AI. I mean, you're
I
training
got
it to have your
you.
voice because you're trying to, as you said, make
And
money from
there you go. And so that I definitely get. Yes, to that extent, then it does help to say like this is my likeness. For instance, like when I like to write a paper or something like that, I'll upload like my old papers and say like, hey, this is my writing style. With that, can you give me like an outline of a paper with my sort of writing style?
it. Right.
So to your point, it could support, but then also defining what polite means for you too, right? So there's some nuances here that I don't know have necessarily there's been enough research around to truly implement. But very soon, I think we're going to start seeing more, and it's so cool because that's a whole nother thing that we didn't even get a chance to talk about, right? Like there are people who are making clones of themselves or digital twins. Do you remember that word, Devin, from G? People are making digital twins of themselves, which is really, really cool and also kind of frightening.
There was another comment from Anissa saying that she loved how you compare AI to literacy with how relevant and important it is today. So thank you for that. Had another question from Andre, more of a lighthearted question. What are your thoughts on the Tesla bots, and would you get one when they first come out?
I think I have a lot of thoughts on the Tesla bot. First of all, they're called Tesla bots, but that's because Elon has a lot of money and put Tesla on the bot. Okay, so we give him so much credit, but there's a whole nother company that's been working on this for the last I don't know 5 years or whatever. And I encourage you to look them up on YouTube. I can't think of the name, right? And they're responsible for the actual intelligence and what we're actually seeing. I have to just put that out there because, just because you put Tesla on everything, it's a Tesla bot. Well, okay, so that's my first thought. My next is that I think that it really showcases where we're headed, right? I joke all the time, saying like, oh, iRobot, let's not worry so much about the iRobot scenarios. Let's focus on the things that we should be worried about, which is not being an active part of this economy and biases, blah, blah, blah. And then, here comes these bots that are now walking around having full-on conversations and making drinks for you and all the other things, right? I think it's really, really cool. I think it shows that we definitely need to have some stronger regulations as soon as possible. I think it showcases us how technology is moving so fast that government is not can't wrap its head around. And then yes, I would get one. It's my job to have one because I'm the CEO of a tech hub where I need to educate myself on all these cool technologies and then share it out with community. So I will buy one for the lab. But would I live with one? That's another thing. That's a whole nother thing. Would I live with one? I don't know. I'm living with robots now, right? With Alexa. Alexa's always listening to me. So it's not like I don't live with a robot, but like one that can walk around and like be confused about what time I want my hot coffee to be made and then like accidentally pour it on me to wake me up. No, like I don't know. So I mean, there's a lot of thoughts that I have around there. I haven't explored it enough to like speak super intelligently about what I feel or how I feel I would like adopt it into my own life. But I do think that we just have to be mindful of how these things come about. And they didn't just pop up one day, right? This sort of technology has been developing for some time, just like ChatGPT. Artificial intelligence is a term that was coined in 1940s. If you take a look at the Tesla bot, at the operating system in its head, it's just OpenAI, right? So understanding how these different companies are working together to make these things come to life and be commercialized, I think is important because then it will help you to see why it is important for you to learn about ChatGPT, why it is important for you to learn about OpenAI, because of how quickly technology is moving. If you decide I don't want nothing to do with ChatGPT, then you just decide that you don't want to learn about the Tesla bot.
There it is. Well, no, that brings us to time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But amazing conversation today. Nadiyah, how can everyone stay connected with you and engage with you after the day?
Yes, MilkyWayTechUp.com would be one way. Feel free to join our distribution list. Please follow me on LinkedIn. I wish I had been smart enough to have my LinkedIn link ready. I'm going to drop it in the chat, but feel free to follow me on. Oh, there you go. You had it. Okay. Yes, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn so that you can follow the journey of Milky Way Tech Hub and be a part of our growing programming. And then if you're in Wisconsin, WITechMonth.com, we got about 6 more days left to this thing. So feel free to come out to one of our events. Happy to have you.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing with us today, Dr. Johnson. So glad to have you with us. And this information is critical, it's important, and we have to make it accessible to our community. So thank you for doing just that through this platform and everything you're doing every day through Milky Way, Jet Constellations, and all the other amazing things you're doing there. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining today, for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching this, and share this with somebody who needs to hear this information and hear this in a way that's digestible. I know that is real. So for those who are on the call, you can visit bdpa.org/tech in career talks, and you can find this. It's also on our YouTube channel, National BDPA, and that link is in the chat as well. So thank you all. Great conversation today, and we'll see you back soon for our next one. Stay safe, stay blessed.
Thank you.